What's up, everyone, and welcome into episode number 469, where the Detroit Tigers trade deadline has finally passed. Disappointing trade deadline, to be completely honest with you. They did go out and get a few arms. The arms were probably not what fans expected. There was no bat that was brought in as well. I think a lot of fans really wanted some bullpen help and a hitter or two. Obviously, the Tigers did not do the hitter part of that. They did bring in some bullpen arms. I'll talk about the arms that they brought in, why it was a disappointment, bring up one quote that Scott Harris said in a recent interview about the trade deadline. And then on the other side, we got the Detroit Lions playing the first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game against the Chargers. Obviously, if you watched the game or saw the score, didn't go the way that Lions fans thought it was going to go, but overall, I thought there were some good things about it. I also thought there were some bad, some concerning things about it. In my opinion, nothing to be too concerned about overall with kind of the team's overall goals in the regular season, but there's some things that really need to be talked about for this Lions team, but not a ton of subjects, but a lot to go into on those subjects. So let's get right into it with the Detroit Tigers trade deadline. Like I said in the intro, a lot of people thought that the Tigers needed to go get help in the bullpen, needed to go get more arms. And this trade deadline started out with the Tigers doing that and just continuing to do that over and over and over again. And it really started out with a trade that brought Chris Paddack, who was a starting pitcher from the Minnesota Twins, to the Tigers. They end up basically trading a prospect that's not really a very highly ranked prospect, so you're not giving a ton. But a little bit more about Chris Paddack. Coming in, obviously has been struggling this year. That's going to be kind of a common thread with these pitchers, is going to be struggling a little bit. He ended up coming in actually having a pretty great start for his first one as a Tiger, because guess what? He's going to be someone that's going to be very dependent on for this Tigers team, because Reese Olson out for the year. So that's unfortunate. But Chris, great first game, 6 innings, 1 earned run, 5 strikeouts, exactly what you need. You're going to need that more often with Reese Olson being out for the year and kind of needing Jack Flaherty to step up as well. Outside of that, you obviously have Tarik Skubal as well, which is the best pitcher in baseball. And then the Tigers also went to go get 41-year-old pitcher Charlie Morton. If this was Charlie Morton about 5 years ago, I would be absolutely thrilled about it, but he is not what he used to be. He has a 5.42 ERA. Obviously, with that ERA and record overall hasn't been great. Now, the Baltimore Orioles pitching hasn't been great either, so maybe this is a little bit of a reclamation project. That's going to be a lot of what these trades are, is reclamation projects, and it's almost one of those situations where you have Scott Harris that fully believes he's the smartest man in the room. And that can be very good, that can be very bad. That could be an issue in the future. With that being said, what the Tigers have, especially for a pitching coach with Chris Fetter, he's one of the best, if not the best, pitching coaches in the entire MLB. So if you want to trust a guy to kind of bring out a little bit of what these guys have left, I think he's going to be that guy that does that. Now, again, when you have a guy like just Tarik Skubal that is kind of your number one, and then everyone else has been iffy throughout this year, I would think that you would really want to get a proven guy, at least a starter that has shown success this year, that has been good this year. But unfortunately, that's just not what Scott Harris did with these starters. He went out to get guys with experience. He went out with guys that maybe have 1 or 2 good years left, and that's a really big risk and an opportunity for other teams in the AL to make moves that make this team better. And unfortunately, I think these at least 2 moves so far, and I think the moves in general that I'll talk a little bit more about here shortly, isn't really showing the front office believing that this is a team that can win a World Series. Now, do I think it is a team that can win a World Series? Probably not, even though they have the best record in the AL. You never know. This team has gotten hot at the right times. They're playing really well right now. If you get hot going into September, you never know what can happen. You can win a series or 2 and maybe make a possible World Series. Probably not what to expect as Tigers fans, even though that this year has been great. Seems like the front office kind of believes that as well a little bit, which is disappointing to say the least. But then it kind of just continues on to the relief pitchers as well, because they end up trading for three guys. I know they end up trading for one other guy, but the main three guys is Kyle Finnegan, Paul Sewald, and Rafael Montero. Out of the three guys, probably Kyle Finnegan's probably the biggest name out of all of these guys. He was the closer for the Nationals. He struggled this year. He's been struggling in the last couple of years. He hasn't been as good as he has been. But again, you have Chris Fetter as your pitching coach. If he's able to find anything, this is a guy that should be maybe your eighth inning guy, maybe your closer. I don't know if they necessarily take Will Vest out of the closer role, but you have a guy that can be a bit of the bullpen kind of guy that has had success. And if Chris Fetter is able to kind of find a little thing here or there, or maybe now that he's actually a part of a good baseball team, maybe he'll kind of start to turn on a little bit. Or you see a lot of players struggle with their old baseball team. They kind of find a new team, find a new scenery, and then start pitching a little bit better. And having this kind of guy that has shown success in the past is nice, but again, it's kind of leading towards not really that guarantee kind of guy. And even though the bullpen year in, year out isn't necessarily guaranteed, that's why they're a bullpen, I would love to see if the Tigers should go get a guy that's playing really well this year. And unfortunately, Kyle Finnegan has not been that guy. Paul Sewald has not been that guy either. He's have a 4.70 ERA, 35 years old. He's a Cleveland Guardian, so we have an in-conference trade, which doesn't happen a ton but Tigers made two of them, the Twins and the Guardians. He's definitely older. That's just kind of where the Tigers have been going, is just older pitchers. He does have a little bit more swing and miss type of stuff, which I think the bullpen is really needing. The Tigers don't have a ton of swing and miss stuff in the bullpen, so obviously having Paul Sewald that has a little bit more is going to definitely help this bullpen. But again, he just hasn't been good this year. And then really the last really major quote-unquote bullpen piece, which I don't even know if you can consider a major bullpen piece at this point, is Rafael Montero. Rafael Montero, if you want to talk about the most likely to have the most swing and miss stuff, this is the guy. This is the guy that if you're going to be able to turn it around, he's probably going to be the guy that's going to have the biggest impact. With that being said, he's been missing a lot of pitches. He's not been able to throw many strikes. A lot of people thought he might be DFA'd at this point. You end up trading for him. You basically don't trade anyone of importance to any of these teams, and you're trying to get him back into kind of what the Tigers do well pitching overall, is throwing strikes. And that's going to be something that this pitching staff, AJ Hinch, is not going to let go. Because if you're a Tigers pitcher, you have to throw strikes consistently, or you're not going to be able to be put out there. You're not going to be able to be trusted. And that's been Rafael Montero's biggest miss this year. He just hasn't been able to throw strikes. He was really good with the Houston Astros in 2021. Just hasn't found that form, and maybe they find that form overall. But overall, thoughts on this trade deadline? Very disappointing, to be completely honest with you. I thought there was a ton of teams in the AL that had a much better trade deadline. I also thought that the pieces that they got just aren't guaranteed. And if you're in your spot as the Tigers, I feel like you need to find a guaranteed guy. And you just, in my opinion, didn't. Maybe some of these guys turn out, and maybe Scott Harris is the smartest guy in the room. Maybe some of these deals end up working. We've seen Scott Harris take chances on guys like Zach McKinstry, and it's worked out beautiful for them. But a lot of these guys are older. There's been jokes made that you have to be above 40 years old and have a +5 ERA to get traded to the Tigers. Kind of seems pretty true. And then you also have a quote from Scott Harris earlier today, and he basically said, felt like some of the moves we didn't do could have haunted us in the future. I understand that quote, that you didn't want to trade some of your top guys for guys like Eugenio Suarez or guys like Mason Miller. I understand that, but at the same time, this is part of my rebuttal to that statement. Yes, you don't want to give up Your number one, your number two, number three. Why can't you give up 9, 10, 11 to go get a more proven guy on the prospect rankings? Like, your minor league system, for a lot of people, is considered the best minor league system in the MLB. I'm not saying give up a Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal. I'm not saying that whatsoever. You can at least go trade one of these guys to get a more proven guy. And I know a ton of people are going to say, well, these guys are the future of the team. They're going to come up and be great players. And I'm not saying you're wrong with that. But what I'm saying is you see teams that have great prospect systems, but those guys just don't pan out. And there's no guarantee that any of these guys pan out. I think Kevin McGonigal is going to be incredible. I wouldn't have traded him for anyone. I wouldn't have traded Jose Bracheno for anyone. I wouldn't have traded Max Clark for anyone. But at the same time, you need to trade and make a difference on this team. And while these guys can be the future for the Tigers, I think you need to do a better job of balancing the future and trying to win. Because every single year, you never know what happens. And like I said, these guys aren't guarantees. These guys aren't 100% all going to work out. And that's just the way it is. And you have guys in the MLB right now that you could have traded maybe the 7th, 8th, 9th prospect for that has had success in the MLB. And when you have a team that has the most wins in the AL and has the possibility of being a team that can make a run, you don't know how many chances you're going to get at a run. Like, you see the Baltimore Orioles a few years ago. They thought they were going to be great. Well, guess what? They're not great anymore because they didn't have pitching. You look at the Kansas City Royals years and years ago. They made a run, thought people would be back. They weren't. You saw the Chicago White Sox. White Sox were considered a great farm system. Never panned out a few years ago. You never necessarily know what's going to happen. And I think overall, if you're a Tigers fan, I think you have to be disappointed in this trade deadline as of right now. Now, again, if this pans out, if these moves end up working, then yeah, Scott Harris is the smartest man in the room. But we've seen GMs that believe that they're the smartest man in the room. They made moves like this in other sports, and guess what? They weren't smartest man in the room, and they end up being fired later on. So not saying that's going to be what's happening to Scott Harris. I think Scott Harris has done a remarkable job of turning this thing around. But I think theirs is a really pretty disappointing trade deadline. But hey, maybe this team is going to use this as motivation. I don't think motivation is something that they really need very much of. I think this team plays extremely hard, and they can make a run. And these trades later in the future, when it comes to September, October baseball, maybe they end up panning out. So at this point, just trust Scott Harris. Maybe they work out, or maybe they are able to get a few good months out of some of these guys. But yeah, going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Let's go over to the Lions, though. Definitely want to talk about the Hall of Fame game because I thought there was a few really good things I saw from the Hall of Fame game. Obviously, the score is not one of them, 34-7 loss against the Chargers. But there was a few individuals on this team, offensively and defensively, I thought really stood out. I thought there was about 3-4 individuals offensively that stood out. Defensively, I thought there was probably about 3 for the most part. Isaac TeSlaa is one of the guys I thought really stood out. You really saw what Brad Holmes saw in him in this game. And he only had 2 catches in this game, but those 2 catches were really great routes. And he was able to use his speed to continue to gain 5-10 yards. I believe he averaged like 22 yards per catch. Like, he looked really good. And he also had a great rep on punt coverage. He just sprinted down there and forced a fair catch from the other team. Like, great punt coverage rep. If he can do that, if he can be kind of the wide receiver 4 on this team, maybe even work his way up to a wide receiver 3, I think he's going to be a guy that can very much have an impact on this team. And I thought his first game, he was really, really good and really impactful. The other wide receiver I really wanted to talk about is Dominic Leggett. I thought that he was the second best wide receiver. He did have a pretty bad drop early on in this game, but after that bad drop, he really responded. He also had good special teams as well. I thought overall, you kind of saw his speed. I thought you saw his agility. I thought you saw outside of the drop pretty good hands. So he's another guy that I thought that really kind of played pretty well in this game outside of the bad drop on Kyle Allen's pass. I think you responded pretty well for it and love to see that. Third guy I really want to talk about, Craig Reynolds. I thought Craig Reynolds ran really hard. I also think Craig Reynolds got too many rushing attempts. He had like 11 rushing attempts in the first half. I think that's way too many for him. I don't think he needs that many. I think he was by far the best running back that played in the Hall of Fame game for the Lions. He hit the hole. You saw his speed. You saw his power. You saw his ability to just continue to go. End up scoring the only touchdown that the Lions had in that game. And yeah, I was just pretty impressed with Craig Reynolds. And I think if he continues that going forward, I think he's going to be on the roster again for the Lions. Now let's talk about the good defensive players. And I think Ahmed Hassanin was by far the best defensive end on this roster for this game. Like, you saw what Aiden Hutchinson was saying when he basically told him to stop watching his film. Like, you saw a swim move that looked exactly what Aiden Hutchinson does. Like, this guy has a motor. Like, he just goes and goes and goes. And I think Ahmed was great yesterday. I thought that he made some great tackles. I thought his effort was fantastic. You can see why the Lions really like him and how much this means to him, because even after the game, he cried. Like, this was a huge game for him, and I thought this was one of those games that he really stood out on the defensive line compared to everyone else. And I think that's one, not only a good sign for the Lions, but I also think he's going to be kind of one of those fan favorite kind of guys that you're going to really buy in, that you're going to really hope works out. And he's just continuing to learn from Aiden Hutchinson. And even though he basically told him to quote unquote stop watching his film in like a funny way, I think he's going to continue to learn that way. And if he continues to do that, continues to have that motor, I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be on this Lions team for a decent while. Might not have the biggest impact, but he's going to be a guy that's going to learn, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to continue to work hard, and I think this is a good first start for Ahmed Hassanin. Other guys I thought played pretty well secondary-wise. Rock Ya-Sin, I thought, was by far the best secondary guy on this team, especially at corner. He made a great tackle on third down in the red zone. Unfortunately, the Chargers end up scoring the next play, but fantastic tackle. Pretty good in coverage as well. He's kind of a veteran kind of guy. I think he really shows, if he continues to perform like this, that the Lions have more depth in the corner room, which is obviously great, especially if an injury does happen. He's going to be a guy that you can really depend on, and I think this was a really good performance, and he wasn't really out there too long for the Lions in the Hall of Fame game. The other player I thought that performed pretty well after a pretty rough start was Grant Studdard. He was a linebacker. I thought he was pretty good out there. I thought he was basically the guy that was noticed most in the linebacking room, and for good reason. I thought he made quite a few plays. Now, he did return 2 kicks, which was pretty weird to see a linebacker return 2 kicks. You don't really see that too often. But the first one, he fumbled. Obviously not the way that you want to start the game. You end up going down 7-0 early on because of that. Second one was actually a better kick return. Didn't have another one after that. But even after that fumble, I thought that Grant responded really well for this Lions team. Thought he was all over the field making tackles. Thought he was decent in pass coverage. There was one play that seemed like him and another guy kind of had a little bit of miscommunication. Definitely need to work on that. But I thought he was a guy, at least on the linebacker spot, that performed the best out of everyone. Now let's go to the negatives, because there was concern about this team. And number one is special teams. The special teams were not very good at all. You had a couple fumbles on kick returns. You had a kickoff that didn't make it to the 20, so they end up getting penalized for that. Special teams just wasn't very good, and you know that the special teams coach is not going to be very thrilled. I think they're going to obviously work on that because the Lions have had a pretty good special teams under Flip. So definitely think Flip's going to figure that out. Two other guys I really want to talk about before I talk about kind of the whole game. Ennis Rakestraw Jr., I thought had a rough game. Now he is coming back from a chest contusion, so maybe he's still feeling that a little bit. He hasn't had a ton of practice time, so hopefully that's really a big factor. He did get a pass interference. He did get beat pretty bad on like a fade, so definitely need him to improve. This was definitely a rough game for him. I think he will be better. I think he does have a ton of potential. He's just coming back from injury, just hasn't had a ton of time. But I'm going to have to see a lot better performance in these next couple of preseason games to say that I'm confident that he still has that potential. Do I think he's any chance away from getting cut? No. If he continues to have performances like this, maybe, possibly a chance. But I think this was just a one bad game, and hopefully he can play a little bit better as he continues to play. But just wasn't a great day for Ennis Rakestraw Jr. Last one I really want to talk about, and probably the biggest concern, is the quarterback room. I thought Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker, like everyone else, performed very poorly. Now, this might be a hot take, but I thought Kyle Allen was quite a bit better overall than Hendon Hooker was. With that said, that's like comparing one person playing bad comparing to one person playing horrible. Like, I thought Hendon Hooker didn't really look super confident on this offense. He just didn't seem like he was throwing the ball very well. He had one really poor pass that should have been intercepted. His last pass was actually not too bad. The safety just ended up basically ripping the ball out of the wide receiver's hand. So I don't really blame him too much, but just really didn't seem like Hendon Hooker just wasn't confident in this offense. His first play I thought was obviously one of his best plays. He had a really nice spin, only picked up 2 yards. But I just don't think Hendon Hooker just fits what this offense needs. And I feel like that just needs kind of a timing type of quarterback. Now, does that mean Hendon Hooker is always going to perform poorly? No, that doesn't. I just thought that Hendon Hooker overall didn't perform good and just didn't look comfortable. And this is just an offense that is different to what he had at Tennessee. And even though he didn't perform well, you also have the other backup quarterback in Kyle Allen that started the first half that didn't perform well. Now, at times, I thought Kyle Allen showed a little bit more poise than what Hendon Hooker did, and I think he showed a little bit more confidence when it came to offense. I think you kind of see the different style of quarterback that Hendon Hooker and Kyle Allen is. I think Kyle Allen is more of a guy that's basing on timing, hitting his spot, kind of what the Lions tried to do. It's all about timing. And I thought you saw several throws from Kyle Allen. That was actually pretty good. The Dominic Lovett drop was a pretty good pass. Should have been caught. Now, at the same time, I also saw the two probably worst passes of the night. You have what should have been a pick six, an awful pass that basically the Chargers player baited him throwing into, something you should never throw, and he ended up throwing it. Ends up throwing a interception into the end zone as well to Isaac Tesla. Threw it too far inside. Two really bad throws. And what this basically, in my opinion, means is that the backup quarterback is not on this team right now. And if that's the case, you need to go find a guy. You need to maybe go trade a guy. Maybe go get a veteran that retired or maybe still out there that you trust. Maybe a Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know if you'd be willing to come back, but you really need to find that number 2 guy. Or you really have to hope that Jared Goff stays healthy. One of those two, because the first game, that's the biggest concern, in my opinion, is the backup quarterback. As of right now, from what I saw, you can't trust any of these guys to go in and win you a game. And while for a lot of the NFL, you really can't trust a lot of these backup quarterbacks to win you a lot of games anyways, I just think this backup quarterback spot is just not good. None of these guys performed well. I thought Kyle Allen performed better than Hendon Hooker, but when you throw 2 interceptions, is it really performing that much better than the guy that threw 1 interception that I thought didn't look great either? Not really, but I thought that at least Kyle Allen to me, looked more comfortable in the offense, finding his guys, having that rhythm, kind of looking for that timing than Hendon Hooker did. But obviously, not the performance you want if you're the Lions. Unfortunately, end up getting basically beat really, really bad in this game. But it's preseason. There's really nothing to be super concerned about. Doesn't seem like there's really a ton of serious injuries from this game. We'll find out on the next press conference for Dan Campbell. Hopefully not a ton of serious injuries. Just stay healthy. Hopefully the offense continues to perform a little bit better. A lot of these guys are going to be backups or aren't even going to play on this team, aren't even going to make this team. So I don't think there's a ton of concern. Like 26 of the starters did not play. So yeah, I'm not super concerned. Anyone that thinks they're super concerned, or anyone saying that the Lions miss Ben Johnson, which they talked a lot about last night, we just haven't seen it. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff, but there's going to be some things here and there that might be a little bit different. Might take a little bit while to get into, but overall, not seriously concerned outside of maybe the backup spot, and maybe it was just a really bad game for both of them. I don't know, but yeah, not the result you really want if you're a Lions fan, not really the trade deadline you want if you're a Tigers fan. But overall, lots of news, lots of things to talk about, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed the last few episodes. For anyone that's listening that's new, thank you so much for supporting. Please go listen to the last interview. Next interview will be great as well. Please continue to like, share, subscribe. Really appreciate that. And yeah, that's a wrap to episode number 469. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in to the next one.